Christmas. Decking the halls with boughs of holly, chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Krampus nipping at your heels. No, wait, who's Krampus? You may be asking yourself. Well, by Krampus, I don't mean that thing you do in the bathroom when you're not feeling well.
Ha ha ha! Classic comedy.
I'm referring to St. Nicholas's half-goat, half-demon counterpart from Austrian folklore. On the eve of St. Nicholas Day, December 4th, St. Nicholas's job was to visit good people in the town and give them gifts and wisdom to reward them for their decent behavior through the year. On the flip side of that, we have Krampus, who was supposed to visit the naughty people and either beat them with sticks, or stuff them in bags and drag them away to hell so they can be cannibalized. Merry Christmas, everyone! Most North Americans aren't familiar with Krampus, but if you are, it's probably because you've seen one of his TV appearances, or you remember that 2015 movie of the same name starring Todd Packer from The Office and Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec.
He's come for us all?
It was Krampus.
But the thing is, Krampus isn't just a one-off character intended for holiday specials and B-movies. He's so much more. And while he might be in the shadows, Krampus has made a large subcultural footprint while slowly cementing himself into the mainstream. So today we're going to talk about Krampus, what he represents in subcultural movements versus mass media, and the possible implications of how he's depicted in the West. Before we dive into who Krampus is today, we should probably look at how he started. Despite how distinct Krampus is as a character, his origin story is the equivalent of taking a bunch of stuff, shoving it in a bag, and shaking it up. And the reason for that is nobody is 100% certain of his parents getting shot in an alley story. We have estimates about what it might be, but people are constantly adding to the folklore and there's a lot of moving pieces, so it's kind of hard to track. So the version that I'm going to tell you here today is not the version that everyone agrees on, but it's what I've gathered from watching way too many YouTube videos and reading way too many articles and academic papers about this. It's been a very long month. Okay, so there are two possible origins tied in place for oldest story. We have the Norse origin, where Krampus is supposed to be the son of Tom Hiddleston, aka Loki, and the goddess of the underworld named Hel with one L. And then we have the other origin where he's apparently a pagan fertility god who's supposed to ward away winter. But again, both of these are kind of just moving targets and we don't exactly know what's going on with these, so we're gonna keep going to something a little bit more certain. Before we move on, I'm just gonna say that I've been pronouncing Krampus's name wrong. It's Krampus, so for the rest of the video, I'm gonna refer to him as Krampus. Just a heads up.
Krampus. If you want Krampus.
For the first concrete reference on how Krampus began, we need to look at another dark Austrian figure from about the 1400s named Frau Perchta. While Krampus only punished, Perchta doled out both punishment and reward. The story goes that if you were good through the year, around Yule, Perchta would visit you and put a shiny silver coin in your shoe. Which is honestly dope, because like, who couldn't use a silver coin? That was funny, don't worry. But if you were bad, she would cut you open, tear out your innards, and replace them with like straw and pebbles before piecing out. Now that might sound appealing if you're like a scarecrow that somebody stuffed with human innards that you now want replaced with the appropriate straw, but I'm going to assume most of you aren't in that demographic.
They tore my legs off and they threw them over there. Then they took my chest out and they threw it over there.
Anyway, Perchta had these helper spirits called Perchten. The Perchten came in two forms. There were the good Perchten who would bestow good fortune upon good people, and there were the bad Perchten that would help punish people, and they had these big horns and gnarly fangs and were just covered in animal hides. Basically, early Krampus. These bad Perchten became the inspiration for festivals in about the 1600s known as Perchten runs or Perchtenlaufs. In the festivals, young men would dress up as these Perchten, get drunk, and just go crazy through the streets. The purpose of these events were to ward off evil spirits, but also because they were fun. Probably. Most likely. Yeah.
Let's make some memories, huh?
They almost exclusively happened during the winter or our holiday time, not because of any associations with religion or St. Nicholas, but because in rural alpine villages where farming's kind of your main source of income, the winter's the only time you have free time. But how did these Perchten, who were basically baby Krampuses, who had nothing to do with Christmas, get associated with St. Nicholas, you ask yourself as I continue this story? So flash forward to the 17th century. After the Catholic Reformation, the Archbishop of this Alpine region kicked all the remaining Protestants out of his areas so that Catholics could move in. With the Catholics came these traveling Jesuit plays that would go from house to house during Christmas time. Kind of like carolers, but probably more entertaining, but with worse dental hygiene. These performances included 4 characters. A Butenmand, which I don't know what it is, don't ask me, it's not important to the story, an angel, a Saint Nicholas, and a devil. Since the locals in this area already had a connection with a devil-like scary character that would pop up around those times, aka the Perchten, many historians believe that the connection between the devil in these plays and the Perchten is why Krampus is so tightly associated now with Christian mythology and Saint Nicholas.
It's my favorite part of Christmas, the authority.
And the fear.
It wouldn't be until the 1900s when the word Krampus, which is a derivative of the German word Krampen, meaning claw, would be used in reference to the Perchten festivals or the figures. After several bans in the characters and the Perchtenlaufs in the 17th and 18th centuries by the Catholic Church, the name Krampus and the character were repopularized in the region through, you guessed it, Christmas postcards. Because I gave you all the ammunition you needed to guess that. I didn't. So the deal is that back in the 1800s, lithography became very popular in the German Alpine area. And because of that, people just started printing postcards like crazy of whatever images they can get their hands on. And apparently in 1869, when the people who were printing these postcards got their hands on Krampus, they shizened their holes in it how cool he was and started mass producing images of him. These cards would almost always have the phrase, Gruß von Krampus, or Greetings from Krampus, and usually showed him either kidnapping or beating children, or in lewd positions with or watching women. Because that's the kind of novelty kitsch people wanted around the holiday season. Just child abduction and over-sexualization.
Ha ha ha! Classic comedy.
The big difference between Krampus on these postcards and Krampus in Austrian folklore was that he was no longer this big, shaggy goat thing with a carved face. The illustrators of these cards coded him to be more like the Victorian devil who the audience would have been more familiar with. This representation has stuck ever since, with it being the predominant form we see Krampus in our Krampus-themed media. The Perchtenlaufs became Krampuslaufs, and despite the Catholic Church bans that I just mentioned and another ban by the Nazi Party in the 30s and 40s, these processions are still carried out in many Austrian villages, in addition to some Germanic and Italian villages who are around the Alpine area. There are currently 2 main regional styles of Krampuslaufs being practiced. You have the tamer ones that kind of mimic the Jesuit plays that we talked about before, where troops consisting of a Saint Nicholas, an angel, Krampus's basket carrier, and a bunch of Krampuses will come visit houses and see children, giving them praise and love with Saint Nicholas, and terrifying them with Krampus. The second type of Krampuslauf, the more common and widely known type, is as Christoph Waltz describes,
Where young men put literally on, sheepskin that looks like that, only white, and masks like that, huge carved wooden masks, cowbells. They get drunk, not necessarily in that order. They get drunk first, and then they do the, and they storm like the riders of the apocalypse through the village, and
beat people. He was gonna say the Krampuses beat people with sticks. So now that we're all on the same page about where Krampus came from, let's talk about Krampus in North America. While I was researching for this video and telling my friends what would be consuming most of my time this December, I was shocked to learn that almost none of them knew who Krampus was. You see, I had a podcast back in 2014, not bragging, and in one of the episodes, me and my co-host discussed Krampus and the new movie coming out. But even before then, I had known about him and the myths surrounding him.
There's this one picture of Krampus with a little boy and like a backpack, and the little boy's just like, oh, like he's like you just said, he's mildly annoyed, like, oh, this threw a wrench in my day.
Exactly, like, oh, darn it, like I was planning to go to church, but I guess not today.
Wonderland was gonna be next week.
Darn it, Krampus.
And I just assumed that if I know about a thing, it's probably not that niche or secret. Well, turns out my assumption was wrong when it came to Krampus. Not that many people are familiar with Krampus in North America because he was only introduced to us in 2003, when images of the Krampus postcards and the Austrian Krampuslauf started circulating around the World Wide Web.
What's a web page? Something ducks walk on? Ha ha ha! Classic comedy.
But even then, media depictions of him were fairly limited until the 2015 movie, and still he wasn't really seen as a household name. You can tell by the obsessive number of times Waltz and Fallon feel the need to remind the audience that they're not making up any of this stuff when it comes to Krampus.
Guys, this is not a made-up thing. I'm not making this up. I'm not joking.
I'm not joking either.
It's a real thing, you guys.
But what he lacked in brand recognition, he made up for in subcultural popularity, with images of the Austrian Krampuslaufs inspiring Americans to follow suit. The first Krampus event was in 2011, held in Philadelphia. Since then, the number has grown to over 40 independent Krampus events happening across North America every year. And that number is still growing. Each event is different, but it seems that many of them borrow the procession style from Europe. However, they take away most of the extreme violence and drunken men, which I think is great. These festivals are meant to honor Krampus and how he's represented in the Austrian tradition. The right-hand man of St. Nicholas responsible for punishing wicked people. Krampus's symbolic purpose differs from person to person, but I think he's generally seen as a figure in the discourse of oppositionality against the standard American Christmas. According to many people who celebrate Christmas around the world, the holidays are quote-unquote the most wonderful time of the year, where all our issues melt away and everyone's joyful and saintly and blah 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 blah.
Oh, come on.
But the thing is, none of that is true. I hate to break it to you, but the problems that exist during the year still exist in December. But instead of acknowledging that fact or addressing it in culture, society continues to push this sugar-coated, idealized mentality. Holiday wonder has been commercialized, with companies associating our happiness with the things we buy ourselves and other people.
We gon' have the best holiday here in Old Navy. Happy jammy days, y'all.
So much so that Santa Claus, or the Americanized version of St. Nicholas and Sinterklaas, who came to America way before Krampus did, has become less and less associated with naughty kids getting coal in their stocking. A once fundamental thing he was known for doing, I say as I wear a Santa hat. Instead, advertisers in TV and movies insist that everyone deserves a present, good or bad, because if we actually did maintain this idea of releasing year-long pent-up karma, then parents would be less inclined to buy their kid a lot of presents if they didn't deserve a lot of presents. We need everyone to buy and buy and buy and keep buying until we have nothing in our pockets and our houses are stuffed with plastic dogs that are going to go into a landfill and Axe body spray sets and boxes full of grainy chocolates. This faux Christmas cheer has the potential to foster feelings of dejection and the other from people who don't necessarily relate to this flattening of the world and emotions around this time of year. And this is where Krampus comes in. Hello. By adding depth to those institutions that have been shoved down our throats, he allows us to express those darker feelings, and represents a counterpoint to the sickening sweetness of Christmas while championing accountability as opposed to greed, while also supporting the holiday season in its purest form. But with the introduction of Krampus as a folk character and the American Krampuslaufs, came Krampus in the media. And this is where things get fun, because throughout his Austrian history, Krampus is seen as a subservient balance to St. Nicholas. But as he migrated across the ocean, he became something much more American. I love my finger quotes. In addition to the 2015 movie that most people know about,
It was Krampus.
He's also the focus of several holiday specials and low-budget movies. To get an idea of how he was being represented, I watched every single Krampus thing I could get my hands on, omitting those low-budget movies. Trust me guys, I really tried to get through them, but they were so bad that it was hard to do. Plus, I don't think it'd be worth my time watching them and your time hearing me discuss them, so I'm just not going to talk about them. Anyway, throughout the media I actually watched, I noticed two main ways in which Krampus was represented. And by the way, I'm excluding the 2015 movie from this discussion because we'll be touching on it later. And I'm also not going to be talking about Belschnickel as seen in The Office, because even though they are kind of regional cousins, Belschnickel and Krampus are not the same character.
Judgment is nigh, for der Belschnickel ist I.
So what are the two ways that Krampus is represented? In the first way, he's made similar to how he's seen in American festival culture as a symbol of accountability. Only instead of being paired with St. Nicholas, he's seen as an associate of Santa Claus, or as a foil to Santa's promotion of consumerism.
You have forgotten the reason you were created. You were created for Christmas. It's time for you to get back to work for me.
And in the second way Krampus is represented, he's generally just seen as this big generic monster that doesn't talk and is evil for the sake of being evil. What's notable about these depictions is that there was a clear line between which genres showed him as the other side of a balanced duo and a big, scary, nothing monster. The shows that depicted him as a fair balance to Santa or Americanized St. Nicholas were comedies. Namely Robot Chicken, Rob Spiegel's Aquabats, and American Dad. The latter two presenting him as someone who valued earned punishment, but also earned reward and praise.
Christmas was once a time when the good were rewarded and the naughty were punished. But then, Christmas became a lie. A lie where even the naughty kids got presents anyway.
However, the shows that displayed him as a monster that needed to be conquered in order to get to the true meaning of Christmas were in the mystery and drama genres. So Grimm, Legacies, and Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, surprisingly. These shows looked at him not as part of a pair with St. Nicholas, but as an individual stripped of all meaning and in stark opposition to Santa and Christmas. Side note, I acknowledge that the American Dad episode also has Santa and Krampus fighting, but the battle plays into their exploration of modern capitalism's influence, so I'll excuse it.
Krampus was good! He cared about kids! Santa just spoils them!
And I make a hell of a lot of money doing it. Most of my portfolio is in toy stocks.
Classic comedy.
It makes sense that comedy series would promote Krampus's real meaning. Comedy often falls within counterculture and is able to address society's fallacies and hypocrisies through exaggeration and subversion. Krampus being an overlooked figure symbolizing liability is an easy way to poke at how the holidays commodify morality while also promoting greed and selfishness. But if Krampus is such a great way to discuss nuance, why then do these quote-unquote unfunny shows refuse to use him as such? Well, to answer that question, I think we need to look at other Christmas movies and TV shows that take a dustier approach to the holiday season. Specifically horror films, because I think people are slowly turning Krampus into a Christmas monster. Theories about why we're drawn to horror usually include the fact that it acts as a catharsis, depicting our fears, concerns, and darkest thoughts. Therefore, Christmas horror has the potential to let us escape this overly merry time by mimicking our internal conflicts surrounding the season. Whether that conflict be consumerism, the implications of not being festively enthralled, or acknowledging that there are still issues that Christmas can't wash away. Despite these movies taking a non-traditional look at the holiday season, they generally end in the same traditional optimistic holiday messages, or are just the same slasher movie format we've seen time and time again, where standard average people are faced against unspeakable evil. Take, for example, two holiday classics, Gremlins and Black Christmas. Gremlins explores the corrupting power of commercialism by showing just how good Gizmo is in contrast to how evil the cloned Mogwais were. And in the end, Gizmo needs to take down that evil. And in Black Christmas, sorority girls fight for their life against this random dude that's trying to murder them. That's pretty much it. But at least that's what people tell me about Black Christmas. I've actually never seen it myself. I've sat down and I've tried watching it, but it's too scary for me. But yeah, anyway, let's go. Writers, producers, and directors have since followed that lead with Krampus. In a vacuum, he's a bad guy, so they pull him apart from this harmonious relationship he has with St. Nicholas, and then shove him in the corner with the rest of the Christmas scary stuff. They don't show him as a different side to the same Christmas coin. Not only do they take this nuance away, but they intentionally exaggerate him for the sake of terror, when he's already a pretty scary guy. This practice is reflected in almost any news article referencing Krampus, or trying to educate audiences about him. They omit his historical and traditional context and amp up the fear factor and anti-Santa angle to pique reader interest.
You believe this senile horse shit? Evil Santa, Jesus H. Almighty.
Even among the general public, specifically in the groups that aren't aware of his history, they see him as a defiant figure meant to defeat Santa or give the middle finger to Christmas, as opposed to working in tandem with it. Since I'm just recently dipping my feet into the Krampus world, I don't have first-hand experience with this subject. Thankfully, I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to speak with Kel McBride, one of the founders and organizers of Bloomington Krampus, one of the largest Krampus events in North America, to ask her perspective on Krampus representation in festivals and in media. She said,
"To me, one of the bigger things is this desire to make him a demon or a devil or evil. He's a beast, he's scary, but I don't really see him as a devil. It's kind of a different perspective. To me, he's just a natural counterpart to St. Nicholas.
But why is there this draw to make Krampus a horror or anti-holiday icon? Well, I think the reason lies in what some believe to be the cause of human fear. Not a scary horned demon goat thing, but life itself. Proposed by philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas and Martin Heidegger, the root of human anxiety is that at the core of being, there is nothing. Everything is an empty void. Empty void. Empty void. As stated in a paper entitled Culture, Evil, and Horror by Paul Santilli, this anxiety discloses the world as something open and possible for which the human being has to take responsibility. Therefore, we must make our own meaning to combat the dread of this inherently unstable, abstract, and impermanent nature of existing. That's why we develop culture, classify and categorize everything, because it makes us believe there's something in the nothing. I affirm the simplest way of categorizing things with the least resistance is to just shove stuff into one of two distinct boxes, good or bad. The gray, on the other hand, is not as easy to understand and reminds us of how confusing life is. It scares us. So when we're introduced to concepts like Krampus, we squash the inherent confusion by compartmentalizing him, making him easier to understand in the context of our own world. This intersection between the true meaning of Krampus and manufactured extreme horror is where we get to the discussion of Michael Daltrey's 2015 Krampus movie. Sidebar to preface this section. Everything I'm about to say here are my own opinions and analysis, and I by no means represent the feelings of everybody within the Krampus community, which I do not identify as a member of. I'm just a big fan. This film is about Krampus descending on a town to punish its residents for exchanging their Christmas cheer for obsessive greed, but focuses on one family as Krampus uses stereotypical Christmas iconography to torment them and drag them away one by one. It's not the most amazing movie ever made, but it's pretty fun and weirdly thoughtful. It uses Krampus to peel away the artifice of the holiday season to reveal themes of family and unity. Not cheerfully, but in a way that maintains that actions have consequences regardless of if you think you're doing something bad or not. Which is not usually a message you hear around the Christmas season, or like ever. Many within the Krampus community, including Kel, see this as an inaccurate representation of Krampus.
At the very end, Krampus just had on a big hood, and he had this old white man kind of look. He was a creepy old man. And Krampus is not a creepy old man. You know, he's a beast. I mean, he could have made a Krampus that was terrifying. And instead, he just put an old man in a cloak.
However, as someone who's outside the community learning about Krampus for the first time, my perspective is that, while Doherty does use an Americanized version of Krampus, the mixture of it with elements of Austrian tradition could help ease American audiences into the world of the film and the myth, making it a less stressful experience to understand this creature steeped in history and tradition. I think the key difference between the horror Krampus and the traditional Krampus is that in the film he's not seen in opposition with Saint Nick or that he's just making people's lives bad for fun. The purpose for Krampus's visit ties back to his original meaning. So while this isn't the most accurate depiction of Krampus, I think it's a good start in getting American audiences used to this figure that represents personal responsibility.
Krampus came not to reward, but to punish. Not to give, but to take.
We've gotten so used to Christmas being this superficial time where commodified happiness runs rampant. But since Krampus is such a new figure in North America, we're actively seeing this compression happen in front of us. We're slowly morphing him into this generic monster so it's easier for us to contextualize the fear we feel surrounding him, as opposed to facing the real existential terror he challenges us with. Once we choose to look at the whole image, we can start feeling real joy as opposed to this false version peddled to us by toy companies. Because while taking responsibility for yourself is scary, it's not as scary as the consequences of blindly floating through life being guided by fabricated dichotomies. A fear that is only a close second to being dragged to hell for not cleaning your room that one time when you were 12.
Oh, great!
And that is my exploration on one of the coolest holiday dudes. This video was originally supposed to be just like a fun, easy theme analysis on the 2015 Krampus movie because it's one of my favorite Christmas films. But once I started looking into the figure of Krampus, I realized he deserved much more of a deep dive. But with that, I'd like to say thank you to Cal McBride for being my window into the American Krampus culture. and for letting me interview her for this video. Again, Cal is the founder and organizer of Bloomington Krampus, one of the largest Krampus events in North America. They ran their first event December 2012, and since then have been doing it every year, which include fire twirlers and people dressed up in these elaborate Krampus costumes. It's really cool. And even with COVID, when they couldn't have these full festivals, they still had online experiences for people to watch. And they even had these boxes you can get so you can celebrate Krampus in your own home. It was really sweet. If you're interested in checking out Bloomington Krampus, I put links to their Facebook and their YouTube in the description below. At this point, I'd like to thank my patrons Matt David, Patrick, Jessica Lee, Eric Brown. Thank you guys and everyone else who contributes for your support. I really appreciate it. If any of you guys watching this also want to support my channel, you can like this video, subscribe, and or donate to my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Before we go, I've made a couple of Krampus puns that I want to share with you guys. They mainly just involve me replacing the word Krampus in Christmas songs, but we're gonna listen to them now. If you want to, you don't have to. Christmas, more like Krampus. Am I right, ladies? It's beginning to look a lot like Krampus. Deck the halls with boughs of Krampus. Don't go swimming until an hour after you eat, or else you'll get Krampuses. Happy holidays if you're watching this during the holidays, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Oh my God. That's the whole thing. That's 3 weeks of work. You're gonna be okay.